Alright nerds, so today we're going to talk about the manufacture of ethanol. In particular, we're going to talk about it industrially via the process of fermentation. Okay, so what's the point? By the end of this you should be able to describe the process of fermentation. You should also be able to describe the process of fermentation industrially. We're going to look at a big flowchart and you need to be able to sort of explain what's happening at each step. So we might not have all the detail here, you might have to do just a little bit of looking beyond this on your own. And you should be able to summarize the chemistry of fermentation. Okay, so production of ethanol. Basically, there are two methods. One we've already spoken about, and that's the hydration of ethylene using an acid like sulfuric acid as a catalyst. Okay, now obviously that 2 in the H2O should be a subscript. So we're not going to go too much further into that at all because we've covered that previously. Now, the other way is we ferment sugars and starches. Okay, so we use yeast cells as a catalyst, and in particular, we actually use the enzymes of the yeast, about 3. So this must be performed at the right temperatures, 25 to 30 degrees, but about 37 if you're doing it in an industrial scale. So the alcohol has to be removed continually. Above about 15% will kill the yeast. Okay, and we distill it. We use distillation to separate the alcohol or the ethanol from the fermentation mixture. Okay, and here's the equation. It's essentially glucose or fructose goes to ethanol and carbon dioxide, but it's in the presence of zymase, and there are actually 3 enzymes that are involved. But as we said, it's a complex reaction, and we just look at it in a very summarized form. Okay, so fermentation basically is the biochemical process in which sugars are converted from glucose. So monosaccharides, by the way. Make sure you understand the difference between a monosaccharide and a disaccharide. So a monosaccharide has 1 sugar ring, disaccharide has 2, polysaccharide, which is what your cellulose and starches are, and glucogen are chains of glucose, or fructose and a couple of others. Okay, all right. So it's a complex series of reactions, but we summarize it like this. We've seen just saw this one, and it's basically for every 1 mole of glucose or fructose, we'll get 2 moles of ethanol and 2 moles of carbon dioxide. So the reaction is exothermic. Heat has to be dissipated, otherwise the yeast will die. Now, yeast they're kind of cool. Like they're an aerobic organism, which means they live with air, like they live in the air. But if they're deprived of oxygen, they'll respire sugars to produce energy anaerobically, which means without air. Okay, so anaerobic fermentation is what gives us ethanol and carbon dioxide. And they'll keep doing this, basically they'll keep doing this until the carbon dioxide is used up. Until the sugar is used up. Now, in your text on page 48, there is a summary. It kind of goes just that little bit over into page 49. There's a summary of the conditions which industrial fermentation happens really well under. I need you to either pause now and go summarize those, or leave a bit of room, summarize it at the end. Okay, now let's continue. So, this is the process of industrial production of ethanol. So you start with organic biomass, and that's your cellulose and sugar cane and whatever. That is then crushed and grinded. Okay, we then hydrolyze it with an acid, and then we filter it. We take the solid residue. Okay, we add more acid, we hydrolyze it further, and it continues around until we've got as much out of that as we can. On the other side, we use the filtrate, which is sugars in an acid solution. All right, so we then neutralize that with calcium hydroxide and then filter it out. Okay, this gives us a solid residue of calcium sulfate. In the dissolved part of the mixture is a sugar solution that is no longer acidic. We then ferment that. Okay, we ferment it using yeast and bacteria. So over here we've got yeast and bacteria, and our process gives us 2 products. We get an ethanol mixture and carbon dioxide. Okay, so the ethanol mixture is then separated out through distillation, and it gives us ethanol and the rest of the byproducts that we don't use. Well, actually, they get used. They're fairly efficient these days, but not for our purposes. However, this distillation process is hugely energy intensive, and that's something we need to focus on when we talk about ethanol as a fuel. All right. Now that whole process, which you probably just wrote down, can be summarized like this. So we start off with our organic biomass, which is then hydrolyzed. Okay, and the hydrolyzed gives us a sugar solution. So once it's been hydrolyzed, we get a sugar solution. What that means is it's breaking the long chain celluloses or starches or maltose even, which is just a disaccharide. It's breaking these into monosaccharides, just glucose. That's why we hydrolyze it. Breaks it down, separates it out into single sugars which have dissolved in the water or in the solution. We then ferment that, and that gives us a carbon dioxide mixture. It gives us carbon dioxide and the ethanol mixture, which we then distill to get just the ethanol. That's it summarized. All right, now hopefully that makes sense. Bring some questions in, and I'll see you in class.